The Capitol Building, Washington, D.C., 1963. Malcolm X arrives for a 2 o'clock meeting with a senator, walks to the security desk, shows his ID and appointment letter. The white security chief looks at the documents, looks at Malcolm, looks back at the documents, says there must be some mistake. Says the senator wouldn't schedule a meeting with someone like Malcolm. Says this is probably a fake letter. Tells Malcolm he needs to leave before they escort him out. Malcolm asks them to simply call the senator's office to verify. The security chief refuses. Says he doesn't need to verify obvious fakes. Calls for backup guards. 2 more guards arrive. They surround Malcolm, ready to remove him physically. Then a phone rings, but before we discover whose call that was, and what happened when those guards realized their mistake, if you appreciate stories about how power operates through gatekeepers, how assumptions become barriers, how people in positions of authority abuse that authority based on prejudice, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button if you believe access to government shouldn't depend on passing a security guard's bias test. These stories matter because they show how racism functions institutionally through procedures and protocols that seem neutral but aren't. Now let's find out exactly what happened when that phone rang. The United States Capitol Building, the center of American legislative power. The building where laws are made, where representatives debate the future of the nation, where democracy theoretically functions. It's a massive neoclassical structure with a distinctive dome visible across Washington, D.C. Inside marble halls, grand staircases, ornate chambers, the physical manifestation of American government. It's Tuesday, October 15, 1963. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Malcolm X has an appointment with Senator Richard Williams from Pennsylvania. The senator requested the meeting, not Malcolm. The senator wants to discuss pending civil rights legislation, wants to understand the perspective of more radical black leaders, wants to know what Malcolm thinks about the proposed voting rights bill, whether Nation of Islam members would support it, what concerns they have about implementation. The senator's office scheduled the appointment 2 weeks ago, sent a formal letter to Malcolm confirming the time, date, and location. Senate Office Building, Room 312. 2 o'clock, the letter is typed on official Senate letterhead, signed by the senator's chief of staff, completely legitimate. Malcolm takes this meeting seriously. He's been advocating for black political power for years. The senator's willingness to listen, even if just for political calculation, is an opportunity to make the case for real voting rights enforcement, for federal protection of black voters in the South, for consequences when officials violate voting rights. This is why Malcolm came to Washington today. He's wearing his best suit, dark gray, perfectly tailored, white shirt pressed, black tie, straight. His shoes are polished, his glasses are clean. He carries a leather briefcase containing documents, statistics, case studies of voting rights violations. He's prepared, professional, ready for a serious policy discussion with a United States senator. Malcolm enters the Capitol building through the main entrance. The building is busy. Staffers hurrying between offices, tourists on guided tours, lobbyists waiting for appointments, the constant flow of American democracy in action. Malcolm walks across the rotunda, his footsteps echo on marble floors. He follows signs toward the Senate Office Building. He reaches the security checkpoint, a desk with 3 security guards, metal detectors, sign-in procedures, standard security for government buildings, enhanced security for the Capitol. This is 1963. The Cold War, concerns about Soviet spies, concerns about protesters, concerns about anyone who might disrupt government operations. The security chief is a white man in his early 50s. His name is Frank Morrison. He's worked Capitol security for 18 years, started as a guard, worked his way up to chief of the checkpoint, takes pride in his work, sees himself as protecting democracy, protecting senators and representatives from threats. He's good at identifying threats, or thinks he is. His threat identification is shaped by assumptions, by stereotypes, by prejudices he's never examined. Malcolm approaches the desk, sets down his briefcase, removes his ID from his wallet, pulls out the appointment letter from his briefcase, places both on the desk in front of Morrison, explains calmly that he has a 2 o'clock appointment with Senator Williams. Morrison picks up the ID, Malcolm Little. That's Malcolm's legal name. He looks at the photo, looks at Malcolm, confirms it's the same person, sets the ID down, picks up the appointment letter, reads it. Senate letterhead, official formatting. Senator Williams' office, October 15th, 2 o'clock, room 312. Looks legitimate. But Morrison's instincts are telling him something is wrong. This black man in front of him doesn't look like someone who has meetings with senators, doesn't fit the profile. Senators meet with lobbyists, with business leaders, with other politicians. They don't meet with people who look like Malcolm. Morrison has worked this checkpoint for 18 years. He knows who belongs in the Senate offices, and Malcolm doesn't belong. Morrison looks up from the letter, looks at Malcolm with suspicion, says there must be some mistake. The tone is not helpful, not confused, accusatory, implying Malcolm made the mistake, implying this isn't real. Malcolm maintains his calm expression, explains there's no mistake. The senator's office scheduled this appointment 2 weeks ago. This is the confirmation letter they sent. Malcolm is expected, he's on time. Morrison says the senator wouldn't schedule a meeting with someone like Malcolm. The phrase hangs in the air. Someone like Malcolm. Morrison doesn't specify what he means. Doesn't need to. Both men know. Someone black. Someone from outside the establishment. Someone who doesn't fit Morrison's mental image of legitimate Senate visitors. Malcolm points to the letter. Official Senate letterhead. Official signature. Official appointment. Everything is documented. Everything is legitimate. He suggests Morrison call the senator's office to verify if there's any doubt. Morrison sets the letter down. Doesn't reach for the phone. Says this is probably a fake letter. Says people forge documents all the time. Says he's seen plenty of fake credentials. Says Malcolm needs to leave the building before things get complicated. Before Morrison has to call more security. Before this becomes an incident. Malcolm doesn't move. Doesn't raise his voice. Doesn't show frustration. Just stands there. Calm, patient. Repeats his request. Call the senator's office. Verify the appointment. That's all that's needed. One phone call to resolve this. Morrison refuses. Says he doesn't need to verify obvious fakes. Says he's worked security long enough to know when something isn't right. And this isn't right. He reaches for his radio. Calls for backup. 2 guards needed at checkpoint 3. Possible security breach. 2 more security guards arrive within a minute. Both white. Both younger than Morrison. Both ready to follow their chief's lead. Morrison explains the situation. This individual is trying to enter the Senate offices with fake credentials. Needs to be escorted from the building. If he refuses, they'll need to arrest him for trespassing. The 3 guards form a semicircle around Malcolm. Not quite touching him, but close. Imposing. Using their physical presence to intimidate, to make Malcolm feel threatened. To encourage him to leave voluntarily so they don't have to use force. Malcolm doesn't back away, doesn't show fear, doesn't react to their intimidation, just stands with his briefcase, his ID and appointment letter still on the desk. He repeats calmly that calling the senator's office would resolve this situation in 30 seconds. 1 phone call. Morrison says that's not happening. Says Malcolm is leaving now, one way or another, voluntary or involuntary. Malcolm's choice. The 2 backup guards move slightly closer, ready to grab him, ready to physically remove him from the building. Then a phone rings. The desk phone, loud ring cutting through the tension. Morrison looks at it, annoyed at the interruption, picks it up, identifies himself. Capitol Security, Checkpoint 3, Chief Morrison speaking. The voice on the other end is sharp, urgent. It's the senator's chief of staff, asking if Malcolm X has arrived yet. The senator is waiting. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock. It's now 2:15. Is there a problem? Morrison's expression changes, confusion, then concern, then the slow realization that he made a catastrophic mistake. He says Malcolm X is here, at the checkpoint. Morrison was just verifying his credentials, making sure everything was legitimate. Standard security procedures, nothing unusual. The chief of staff's voice gets sharper. Asks why it's taking so long. Asks if Morrison is detaining the senator's scheduled appointment. Points out that Malcolm X was explicitly added to the approved visitor list 2 weeks ago. Points out that keeping him at the checkpoint is creating a problem. The senator is on a tight schedule. This meeting needs to happen now. Morrison says he'll send Malcolm up immediately, apologizes for the delay, hangs up, looks at Malcolm. His face is red, embarrassed, angry at himself. angry at Malcolm for making him look bad, even though Malcolm did nothing except show up on time with proper documentation. Morrison tells the backup guards to step back, tells Malcolm he can proceed. His tone is clipped, no apology, no acknowledgement of what just happened, just bureaucratic efficiency covering for his mistake. He hands Malcolm a visitor badge, gives directions to room 312, tells him he's expected. Malcolm takes the badge, clips it to his jacket, picks up his ID and appointment letter, puts them back in his briefcase. Thanks Morrison politely, walks past the 3 guards toward the Senate offices. Doesn't look back, doesn't acknowledge the humiliation they just attempted. Just proceeds to his appointment with dignity intact. The 3 security guards stand at the checkpoint, silent. Morrison is furious, not at himself, at the situation, at the fact that he just got corrected by a senator's chief of staff, at the fact that he assumed wrong. He tells the 2 backup guards to return to their posts. They leave without comment. Morrison sits at his desk, seethes, replays the interaction in his mind, tries to justify his actions, tries to convince himself he was just doing his job, just being thorough, just protecting the building. But he knows he profiled Malcolm, knows he refused to make a simple verification call because his prejudice told him verification wasn't necessary, knows he was ready to physically remove a man from the building based purely on assumption, and he got caught. Malcolm walks through the marble halls, takes the elevator to the 3rd floor, finds room 312. The senator's office. A receptionist greets him warmly. Apologizes for the delay at security. Says the chief of staff called down and was told there was an issue. Hopes everything is resolved. Malcolm says everything is fine, just standard security procedures. The receptionist shows Malcolm to a conference room, offers coffee. Malcolm accepts, sits down, opens his briefcase, reviews his notes while waiting. 5 minutes later, Senator Williams enters. The senator is in his late 40s, career politician, progressive by 1963 standards, genuinely interested in civil rights legislation, but also politically calculating, knows the black vote will matter in future elections, wants to position himself correctly. This meeting serves multiple purposes: policy information, political positioning, future relationship building. The senator apologizes for the security delay, says he heard there was confusion at the checkpoint. Malcolm downplays it, says security was just being thorough, no need to make an issue of it. The senator seems relieved, sits down. They begin discussing voting rights legislation. The meeting lasts 90 minutes. Malcolm presents detailed analysis of voting rights violations in the South, specific examples, statistical data, legal arguments about federal enforcement mechanisms. The senator takes extensive notes, asks thoughtful questions. This is substantive policy discussion, not performative. Not for show, real exchange of information and perspective. At 3:30, the meeting concludes. The senator thanks Malcolm, says this was valuable, says his thinking has been challenged and expanded, says he'll incorporate Malcolm's concerns into his approach to the legislation. They shake hands. The senator's assistant escorts Malcolm back to the elevator. Malcolm rides the elevator down, walks back through the halls, approaches the security checkpoint to exit the building. Morrison is still there, still at his desk. He sees Malcolm approaching. Their eyes meet. Morrison looks away first. Malcolm passes the checkpoint, returns his visitor badge. Morrison takes it without comment, without eye contact. Malcolm walks out of the Capitol building, down the steps, into the Washington, D.C. afternoon. Morrison sits at his desk for the rest of his shift. Can't stop thinking about what happened. Can't stop replaying his assumptions. His refusal to make a verification call, his readiness to remove Malcolm physically, his certainty that the appointment letter was fake, all based on nothing except Malcolm's appearance, all based on his assumption that black men don't have legitimate meetings with senators. That evening, Morrison goes home to his apartment, makes dinner, watches television. But he can't focus, can't stop thinking about the incident, about the call from the senator's office, about the fact that he almost created a diplomatic incident, almost assaulted a man who was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was authorized to do. Morrison has been a security guard for 18 years. He's proud of his judgment, proud of his ability to assess threats, proud of his perfect record, no security breaches on his watch, no unauthorized access, no incidents. But today he realizes his judgment isn't based on actual threat assessment. It's based on profiling, based on assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't, based on racism. The realization is uncomfortable. Morrison doesn't see himself as racist, doesn't use slurs, doesn't attend Klan rallies, doesn't consciously hate anyone. But his actions today were racist. His assumptions were racist. His refusal to verify credentials was racist. His readiness to use force was racist. The evidence is undeniable. Over the following weeks, Morrison changes some of his procedures, not dramatically, not publicly, but quietly. When someone presents credentials, he verifies them, calls the office, checks the appointment list, doesn't rely on his gut instinct about who looks legitimate. Because his gut instinct is shaped by prejudice, he catches himself making assumptions. When a black man in a suit approaches the checkpoint, Morrison's first instinct is still suspicion, but now he recognizes it. Recognizes the prejudice, doesn't act on it automatically, follows actual procedures instead. Other guards notice the change. Ask Morrison why he's suddenly so strict about verification. He says he's just making sure procedures are followed correctly. Doesn't mention Malcolm. Doesn't mention the phone call. Doesn't mention his mistake. Just implements better practices. Malcolm never thinks about this incident again. For him, it was routine. Just another instance of being profiled. Being assumed to be somewhere he doesn't belong. Being treated as suspicious for existing while black. He's experienced this thousands of times. In hotels, in restaurants, in airports, in government buildings. This was not unique, not memorable, just another Tuesday in America. But the senator's office remembers. The chief of staff makes a note in their records. Security Checkpoint 3 has issues with racial profiling. Future appointments with black visitors should include advance notification to security. A workaround. Accommodation for racism, instead of addressing racism directly, but at least it prevents future incidents. 3 years later, after Malcolm's assassination, Morrison reads the news, sees Malcolm's photograph, recognizes him immediately. The man from the checkpoint, the man whose credentials he refused to verify, the man he almost had physically removed from the Capitol building, the man who was right about everything. Morrison sits with that knowledge, sits with the fact that he treated a historic figure like a threat, sits with the fact that his prejudice almost prevented a substantive policy discussion about voting rights, sits with the question of how many other important people he's profiled and dismissed over 18 years of security work. He doesn't become an anti-racism activist, doesn't dedicate his life to fighting prejudice, but he tells the story occasionally. Tells younger guards about the time he almost threw Malcolm X out of the Capitol building, uses it as a teaching moment. A warning about assumptions, a lesson about following procedures instead of instincts shaped by racism. The story circulates among Capitol security, becomes part of institutional memory. The time security almost assaulted Malcolm X because he didn't look like someone who meets with senators. Some guards learn from it, others dismiss it. But it's remembered. If this story made you think about gatekeepers and who gets to decide who belongs in spaces of power, about how security procedures become tools of discrimination, about how assumptions based on appearance block access to democracy itself, then subscribe. Hit that like button if you believe government buildings should be accessible to all citizens, regardless of how they look. Consider who gets stopped and who passes through freely. Consider what that reveals about who we assume belongs in positions of power. Consider what we lose when gatekeepers enforce prejudice instead of following procedures.